It has been said that the three most recognizable words in the English language are God, Coca-Cola, and Titanic. And it's true. That has been said. But that's the only true thing about it. It's based on absolutely nothing. But the fact that this saying has persisted through the years, and the fact that you may have believed it just now when I said it, because it just sounded right, maybe that means there is a bit of truth in there somewhere. But is it really on par with Coca-Cola and God? Is Titanic really that timeless, or is this just a bit of recency bias? Is this just the aftermath of the 1997 film? In 1996, did anybody feel this way about Titanic? Well, the 1997 film was made partially because of the Titanic craze that came from the discovery of the wreck about a decade earlier. The 1996 musical has the same excuse. So did it all start there with the discovery of the wreck? Well, there were at least 7 other Titanic movies before that, and countless books and documentaries. So where did it all come from? Was there a moment in history when the 3 most recognizable words in the English language were God, Coca-Cola, and Elvis, and then something happened to kick off Titanic mania? Well, to answer this question, let's do what we always do on Witness Titanic and go back to 1912. It seems following the initial craze created by the newspapers, survivor accounts, and of course the inquiries, like with many historical events, the world moved forward, especially when what immediately followed the sinking was World War I, other major shipwrecks, the Hindenburg disaster, the Great Depression, World War II, and yes, Elvis. It would have been pretty easy to look back at Titanic after just a few decades and maybe not think much of it. Maybe the Titanic disaster was about to be lost in the overwhelming history that followed it. Thankfully for anyone who loves a good story, in 1925, a young boy from Baltimore, Maryland, named Walter Lord, stepped onto the decks of the RMS Olympic while on a trip with his family. While on board, he was well aware that her sister ship was this little boat called Titanic of just 13 years ago. No doubt, walking around a near replica of Titanic and imagining what went on that night sparked a new fascination within him. He became what must have been at the time one of the few Titanic enthusiasts, and he would eventually set out to write a book about the tragedy. He even tracked down and interviewed 63 survivors of the tragedy to get their accounts. The result was a book called A Night to Remember. It was first published in 1953 and became an instant bestseller, because of course it did. It was the first significant Titanic book in decades. It was the first to bring so many survivor accounts together, accounts that people hadn't necessarily heard before. It was the first book to give the subject a historian's treatment. It had been long enough, Titanic was history, meant to be studied now. And that sort of makes Walter Lord the original Titanic historian in many ways, and he's respected for that reason. And one could argue that this book, A Night to Remember, is responsible for igniting more Titanic enthusiasts than any other source, probably until the 1997 film. And even then, I bet A Night to Remember still has the edge. So if Titanic really belongs alongside Coca-Cola and God, it's because of this book and its 1958 film adaptation. Today on Witness Titanic, we will watch the first half of the iconic and highly praised film A Night to Remember. Much like we did last season with the 1997 James Cameron film, we will all press play at the same time, and I will provide my historical background for your enjoyment. It's worth noting that the 1997 film is, dare I say, heavily inspired by this movie that we are about to watch. I will do my best to highlight moments when this is apparent, but if you're a big 1997 fan, you will see those moments. I promise. Some of them are extremely obvious. Also, compared to every other Titanic movie, 1997 included, A Night to Remember is regarded as the most historically accurate. They seemed to understand when making this film that the reason the book was so successful was the survivor accounts, the realness of the event. To do as James Cameron did and fabricate an entire love story to take us through the event, that just wasn't quite the vibe that A Night to Remember would require. That being said, for the sake of movie making, they do take a few liberties. Only one is egregious that I can think of. But the big thing that they do is they combine multiple survivors into sort of super survivors. So that way we, the audience, don't have to keep track of 63 different characters. There's also characters that are completely made up, names that were not on Titanic, but they are sort of amalgamations, is that a word, of multiple survivors rolled into one person. But what matters is, regardless of who experienced what and who's named what, the experiences that you're seeing on screen came from survivors and came from the pages of this book. The result is a very faithfully done film based on the research that was available to Walter Lord at the time. Now, let's get into this movie at long last. I have it pulled up here I got it on Amazon Prime. It's $4 to rent. It's also on YouTube for free, but there are ads in that version, and you'll have to pause me every time an ad pops up. If that doesn't bother you, definitely do that. Folks, interruption from James of the Future. I actually looked into this a little bit further. The YouTube version, the free YouTube version, is actually at a slightly faster speed than the movie should be. If you're going to do the free version, just know that you're going to have to pause your movie a little bit and wait for me to catch up. It's very slight, but it will be noticeable after a few minutes. So be aware of that. However you're watching, this is how we will all start at the same time. So before the movie starts, there's this odd company video of a big man hitting a gong. He hits the gong twice, and then you see the company name. I've paused my version right when he hits the gong the second time. So just watch that clip and pause it right when he hits the gong, and then let's all together press play in 3, 2, 1, play. And we are off and running. A Night to Remember, 1958. Our first fact of the movie: William McQuitty, the producer of this film, was actually present in Belfast for Titanic's launch. How cool is that? The producer of this movie actually saw Titanic launched. And speaking of, the movie begins, and that's probably not a coincidence, the movie begins with a launching of A Night to Remember's Titanic. And we already arrive at our first of I promise, very few historical inaccuracies. We're watching the christening of Titanic. It's kind of a well-known fact at this point that Titanic was not christened. That was not a tradition of the White Star Line. Not every boat in the world gets christened with a bottle of champagne, but that's what we're watching. It's also one of those stories that because it wasn't christened, it was somehow cursed forever. Did I just see a shard of that glass hit the Thomas Andrews actor? I think I did. We'll have to go back and see that. What ship this is? I think it's either the Queen Mary or the Queen Elizabeth. It's one of the Cunard ships. You can tell in a second here when you see it's the top of its prow. It's pretty unmistakably one of those ships. I'm not an expert with those. I sort of stop at Titanic. Yeah, see that? That's so clearly not Titanic. And this is so clearly a little too modern. But hey, there's no good footage of Titanic's launch to be used in this way. But here we are, A Night to Remember from the book by Walter Lord. Now, we're going to see some really accurate sets here in a little bit, and I actually decided I want to give you a little my own rating of what how accurate I think each set is. They're all very good. I applaud the team behind this movie. All of these actors, I don't recognize a single person, and I doubt you will either. A lot of these people aren't too far removed from silent film stuff. Like there's at least one woman I know that this was her final film, and she was like a silent film star. So it's a pretty old movie. So that's why we don't really recognize any of these names. But the big actor Kenneth More, I couldn't even recognize any movies that he was in, and he was sort of famous. He was a very famous actor at the time. So just goes to show how old this is. But there are a few actors of note in this movie. Sean Connery is in it as a very young man. Sean Connery, who would eventually be James Bond and be a legend in many movies. But he's sort of like a uncredited sailor role. But the one that we all know, you already know if you've listened to this podcast, is Bernard Fox is in this film. Bernard Fox plays Frederick Fleet. We'll see him see the Iceberg in a little bit. And then many decades later, he will play Archibald Gracie in James Cameron's Titanic as an older man. So pretty cool that there's that. And then there's another actor named Rocky Taylor who plays a third-class man in this movie and a third-class man in the 1997 movie. So that's kind of cool. Very cool that the movie gives a little memorial credit to the Titanic and particularly the people who helped make the film. Lawrence Beasley, Joseph Boxhall. Lawrence Beasley, who was a witness on this podcast, and Joseph Boxhall, who will undoubtedly be a witness in maybe next season. They were both brought in to consult on the film. Very cool. Now we open with this train scene. Every Titanic movie needs a train scene, in my opinion. And he's clearly Lightoller, sorry. Got to get used to that. Lightoller and his wife are taking the train down to the ship. Really great train scene with this uppity first-class couple, it seems. They get into a little misunderstanding, a little spat, as it is revealed to us, the audience, that he is, in fact, Second Officer Charles Lightoller. I'm just looking back at my notes, making sure I didn't miss anything. Very cool that we got to see that launching scene, though. Even though that wasn't Titanic, we did get to see a ship with ribs and plates, and we get to see it launched with chains and ropes. It's very, very cool, something you don't get to see anymore. It does kind of impress upon you the grandness, the size of Titanic, the how strong she must be. It's very good storytelling. And I love this scene and the next scene because this scene here in the White Star Line offices, it gives us it starts to tell the story without being too on the nose. Like we now know where the ship is going. For example, I'm pretty sure in one of those scenes, in both of these scenes, they mention Belfast, they mention Southampton and Cherbourg and Queenstown. So by the time these two scenes are over, we know where Titanic came from and where it was headed. And in here, we actually get to hear some numbers, which is another big thing about Titanic movies. We need to know how many people are on board, so they need to tell us in some way. And those numbers, just so you know, he said 332 first, 276 second, 708 third steerage passengers. They were pretty close. They're off by, if you count them all up, they have one less passenger than there should be, but pretty close. 2,208 overall, though. They got that dead on, which is kind of crazy. That has to be a bit of luck there that they got the total number correct. So here we are with a bit of a Downton Abbey type family. This is a couple that we will refer to as the first class couple because we don't really hear their names too much. They will eventually be called Sir and Lady Richard, I believe. They are supposed to be Sir Cosmo and Lady Duff Gordon. But for some reason, legal reasons, sensitive reasons, they don't use the Duff Gordon's name. But this is our first class couple that we're going to follow throughout the film. And we're seeing the life that they have, the home that they have, the fact that this little group of children are coming to wave to them like they're royalty or something. It's really a fascinating world of the first class. But now that I've watched Downton Abbey, I'm very used to this. And now we move on to a wedding scene with again, all these people, they're kind of nameless unless you listen very closely, but these are apparently the Clarks. There was, I believe, a couple on board named the Clarks, but this is one of those sort of amalgamations of second class passengers. Just they are our representatives for the whole class, which already is more than we get in the 1997 film. As you know, we don't get any second class passengers in that movie, but there you go. That was our second class family, and we're already in, assumably, Ireland with our steerage characters here, leaving home, saying goodbye forever, likely. They do a great job of letting us see these people leave from home, because we follow a steerage passenger in 1997, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Jack Dawson, but we don't. He's American, and we don't get to see where he's from and all that. So here we are, actually getting some proper Irish folks, and this is one of the few times we get a last name. That's Mrs. Farrell, and so her husband is Mr. Farrell. The rest of these people, they're just kind of made up characters. Jim Farrell was on Titanic. I don't believe he was that old though. But this guy here, the sort of young protagonist in third class, I believe his name is Mr. Murphy, but I don't think you ever hear that in the movie. And so we're back with Charles Lightoller and his wife talking about his assignment and how his career is going. So we get a little idea of how he's an ambitious person, but he's humble and he's respectable. He's a company man. Like we're just supposed to like him, and that's all we're really getting in this scene. And we're supposed to know that he loves his wife, and we just need to care about these people. And we've seen a first class couple, a second class couple, and some third class folks. He's our crew member, so we get a bit of everybody, which is a very effective aspect of A Night to Remember that we don't get in 1997, where we're really going to get to follow all these people throughout the sinking, and we will meet more people throughout the movie as well. Now, coming up here, we'll get some better shots of Titanic, and you'll start to see some 1997 shout outs, or I guess you'll see some clips like this right here, the funnel with the smoke blowing off. I actually think James Cameron kind of recreated that shot almost exactly. But now we have people boarding this ship. This ship, we're on the bridge. It's very similar to Titanic, but it's so clearly not Titanic. The wheelhouse has a rounded front, more like Olympic would have, but a lot of the equipment on the bridge is the same. A lot of the little bits and bobs are all there, but it's just slightly different. And now we're meeting who is clearly Mr. Ismay, but his name is never actually said in the movie, which is fascinating. And of course, Mr. Andrews, and they're doing the usual, well, you built her, Andrews, because we need to know who these people are, because they're very important. And we need to know that Ismay is the owner, and he's very confident, but we also need to know that Captain Smith is a great leader. We need to know all the tropes of the Titanic film. Now, as for what this ship is, the ship in this movie that they used to film, I don't know how much of it was filmed on this boat. It's called the RMS Asturias, which was built by Harlan and Wolff. So while we're not seeing Titanic or even Olympic, we are seeing a Harlan and Wolff ship from the era, which is kind of cool. We now see the open ocean, and in one of the big surprises, it's already Sunday, April 14th. We're only 11 minutes into the movie, and it's already Sunday. That's kind of awesome compared to the 1997 film. It takes forever to get to that point. We are now in the dining saloon. This is our first set on board the ship. All of these sets were built using actual Titanic blueprints, which is cool. One funny thing about that moment there, you'll have to go back and see it, is this woman just poured out a gallon of salt onto her fruit, whatever she's eating. It's very funny. The salt just pours out of it. But yeah, that room, I mean, 10 out of 10 dining saloon. Gotta be. And now we're on the Californian. We're going to jump around a lot. This is going to be exhausting for me. So I'm going to try to keep up. But we're on the Californian, which is already more than we get in the 1997 film. Of course, there are deleted scenes from the Californian. Definitely go check those out. But throughout this movie, we're going to check in with the Californian and the Carpathia, which is something that this movie does really well. It allows us to experience the wireless traffic so much more than 1997 does. Of course, I don't blame 97. It's got enough going on. It doesn't need any more. But this movie gives us a wider perspective of the disaster from the ships around them. Want to point out that throughout this movie, we are going to hear from or see Ismay, Lightoller, Fleet, Archibald Gracie, Frederick Barrett, Harold Bride, all of those people were witnesses on this podcast, and they will all be in this movie. And so many more future witnesses will also be in this movie. Kind of cool to know that. And you're gonna see things in this movie, and you're gonna go, oh my gosh, I heard about this moment on this podcast. As we head back to the dining saloon, and we have good old Harold Bride, one of our witnesses from very recently. Captain Smith sitting at the, quote unquote captain's table. That's not the captain's table. It just looks like it, and it's used in the 97 film as well. Captain's table was actually nearby. This big table was for bigger parties. The captain didn't sit there with a massive group of people every night, but it looks great in the movie. And now we have our first drama with the iceberg warning. We've talked about how Bruce Ismay gets an iceberg warning, and look at that. Captain Smith just handed him one, and he didn't give it back. So there's already some nice little historical tidbits being thrown in. We're already back on the Carpathia, and we have this cool relationship between the Californian. We have this cool relationship between the Californian's wireless operator, Cyril Evans, and this officer, Officer Groves, I want to say. The officer had a bit of an interest in the wireless in the same way that today we might have a interest in like VR, like, the newest technology. And so throughout the movie, he's in here, which apparently he was in real life. And there's some cool moments between these two as they discuss this brand new technology. It's a cool thing that we get to see between these two. And we just get to see the Californian's crew as just normal people, which I think is nice. It's a nice touch by this film. They're just going about their day normally, trying to do their best, warning nearby ships of the ice. I love this scene. We are in what is unmistakably the third-class general room, and it is spot on. This is a 10 out of 10. That's exactly what it looks like for the most part. And we're hearing this really cute Irish jig. I'm off to Philadelphia in the morning. It's so charming. And it's a real song. I looked it up and I read all the lyrics. They're just very cute and fun. I have had it stuck in my head for the last few days as I've prepped for this. But I love seeing this because this is sort of the third class party scene that you have to have in a Titanic movie. The James Cameron one is much more Irish. It's much more folky, like a folk band is actually playing Irish music, and they're doing that. This group, singing an Irish song, like singing an old jig, a drinking song, of course, but this group, I feel like they're ready to get to America and like assimilate into being Americans. Like Mr. Murphy there, who's singing, he's ready to start his new life in America. Like they're leaving behind Ireland, while in James Cameron's film, it feels like they're bringing Ireland with them. And both are true, of course. Both are true, and depending on who you were, you might have had different feelings, but I just like seeing a different version of a third-class party in this film. And it might be why James Cameron made that choice to go a little more Irish and a little bit less general merriment that this movie has. And to all my Irish listeners, I apologize if my take on this is completely wrong. I certainly don't know. Love that juxtaposition of jumping from the general room to the reception room to our Lady and Cosmo Duff Gordon stand-ins here. That is something that I think James Cameron recreated quite well in his movie, the quick cut from third class to the calm first class. But this is our first-class couple walking by Bruce Ismay having dinner, walking by, I believe, Maggie Brown here in a second as they come to their table. Yep, there she is. Unmistakably Maggie Brown, speaking loudly, telling a funny story, very much like Kathy Bates does in 1997. It's just great that we get to meet these characters again, played by different people, and I think this woman does a fantastic job. I will let you watch the movie at certain points, don't worry. I don't have that much to say. And we're down in the boiler rooms. Thomas Andrews proudly walking around his ship. He's a man of the crew, and this is a scene that's really just meant to show us that he's part of the crew, and he's a good person. He does his job well. We're supposed to like this guy. And I believe this stoker he's speaking to is supposed to be Frederick Barrett. I believe it's uncredited, but somewhere that has been written down. Now we're in the wireless room. So the wireless room gets like a 6 out of 10 for accuracy. It looks nothing like the actual wireless room, but there's a good reason. The wireless room would be impossible to shoot a movie in because the operator is just facing the wall. This corner desk gives us better angles at the men at the table. I have absolutely no doubt that that's why they did this, because there's no other good reason in my mind that they would change this room so drastically. It's just so we can have a bit better of a filming experience. And now we're going to see one of the biggest, probably the biggest historical inaccuracy. This is the only part of the movie that I'm aware of that is just completely fabricated, is completely made up, not accurate. It's fully meant for Hollywood's sake to sell some tickets, get people to come. So John Phillips is writing down a wireless message, an ice warning from another ship. And then someone comes in with more messages from the purser's office. They would have been sent by pneumatic tube, but that's okay. That's not the inaccuracy we're here to talk about, but he just put the stack on top of the message he just took. And then as you'll see here, he puts them all together and he stabs them in this thing saying, I'm done with those. And oh no, there's the iceberg warning. Oh no. It's not historically accurate at all. That's not what happened. It has nothing to do with that, but it's just a little bit of Hollywood magic to make us go, oh no, this could have been avoided. But that's really that and the christening of the ship so far. We'll keep track. But those are the only two egregious things that absolutely did not happen in the Titanic story. We're now back on the bridge, which is, like a 7 out of 10, I would say. It's certainly not Titanic's bridge, but it's darn close. I love that he calls him Chippy because that's the carpenter, and I did look it up, and yes, it was kind of tradition, sort of like calling the wireless operator Sparks, which you might have heard just a few minutes ago. John Phillips got called Sparks, and Harold Bride gets called Sparks in the 1997 film. They also called carpenters Chippy, and so they did that there. Now we're on the boat deck with our old second-class couple who just got married. We haven't seen them since their wedding. Interesting that they're here, and they do mention it, that they're in first class, and they shouldn't be, so they kind of snuck out. What's funny about that is it's because there's no second-class scenes in this movie. It's very much in line with 97, where, at least we got second-class characters in this movie, but still no second-class spaces. It just goes to show how unrepresented second class is, that they had to take our second class couple and put them in a first class space just to show them. Oh no, there's the message. It's still not been sent up to the bridge. Oh no. Now we get a bit of history to make up for the fact that they made up that iceberg warning thing. asking what the temperature's like, talking about how it's just above freezing. They talk about the Labrador Current. They talk about the clear weather and if it's any doubtful, all this stuff. This whole conversation is straight from Lightollers' testimony, as you may recall. Lightollers' testimony, as you may recall from last season. And now he's telling Moody to let the lookouts know, to keep a lookout for small ice and growlers. I mean, this is all straight from Lightollers' testimony. And now we're back on the Californian. Maybe there's a couple too many scenes on the Californian. I don't know. But it's nice. It's gives them a shot to have their story told. And they're seeing ice ahead, and they're going to stop. And that's the fun thing about the Californian story. Stanley Lord here, he is doing his absolute best as a captain. He's doing what he is supposed to do. There's an ice field. It doesn't make sense to proceed. I don't want to go through that at night. I'm going to stop, turn off my engines, and sit for the night. This is how every captain should have responded to seeing ice or hearing about ice. But he's the only one that stops. The Carpathia doesn't. Other ships stop as well. But it just goes to show that at this moment, at least, this Captain Lord, who I think has been cast very well by this actor, I think there's at least some resemblance there. He's doing what he's supposed to. And here he is, the man himself, Bernard Fox. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee are taking their spot in the crow's nest. And he still looks a little bit like this when he's Archibald Gracie in a couple decades. It's pretty cool. And now Lightoller is passing off the watch to Murdoch. And he said, I'm going to go do my rounds, which is exactly what he says in the 97 film, which is fun. I'm off to do my rounds. But we actually get to follow this Lightoller on his rounds. Really beautiful lifeboats. I mean, again, this is a Harland and Wolff ship that he's walking around, so it makes sense that it looks just, it has that Titanic look. We get this weird scene where this couple is like, I don't know, getting a little touchy on the boat deck. I think we see that man later. I have a theory. We'll see when we get to it. Now we have a scene where these first-class men are discussing the day's run with this steward, and they're going to discuss it with Lightoller as well. And this scene is important to me, at least, because, yes, this is something that we know was discussed during the voyage, but it's also proof that at least this movie knows that Titanic was not going full speed, that there was room to grow, as they ask, like, are we going to go full speed tomorrow? So that's nice. I think that's good on the filmmakers to not do the easy thing and just make it that Titanic was trying to break a record. I mean, even 1997 goes further than this movie does in that regard and shows Smith being pressured by Ismay to go faster, which they do not show in this film, thankfully. Now we get a fun scene of drunk third-class passengers in the wrong place. Funny thing that we missed, back in the dining saloon, the band was playing, the ship's orchestra was playing on a stage, which was interesting. Titanic didn't have a stage like that. And there's also some instruments in that orchestra that Titanic did not have, which is funny. And we'll see them again later, of course. Now we have a very cool scene in the smoking room, and this is a 10 out of 10. I mean, look at that. That is a perfect recreation of Titanic's smoking room. I believe the painting is incorrect or incorrectly named, but I think that's the Olympics painting over the fireplace. But that's fine. We can let those things slide. But we're hearing from Lightoller that this man playing cards with this other gentleman, that he's a card sharp. This is a story you'll hear a lot in Titanic things, that there were men on board who made a living jumping from ship to ship, changing their name so they don't get caught, and cheating at cards and making a fortune. And it's one of my favorite storylines in this movie. So this is the beginning of it. We just met Mr. J. Yates, and there's a whole story behind it. He wasn't Jay Yates was rumored to be on Titanic. There was a newspaper article that came out that he was on Titanic and died on Titanic. And so this movie mentions Jay Yates. I assume the book brings it up. The musical has Jay Yates in it as well. But apparently Jay Yates himself made up this rumor to throw off the police or something. It sounds a little outrageous. I wouldn't be surprised to find that that's also a myth. But regardless, Jay Yates was not on the Titanic. So we'll call this the third historical inaccuracy of the film. But in their defense, back in the 1950s, maybe this was thought to be true. Now we're back seeing some more wireless traffic between California and Titanic, hearing about the frivolousness of Titanic passengers, and Phillips just told him to shut up, keep out, all that stuff. And in a very realistic way, it's not a big deal that he was told to shut up, which you might think, or a movie might make it. He's just, you know what, I'm going to turn in. I've been up late enough. It's very undramatic, which you guys know I love that. I think there's something really wonderful about the subtlety of someone just saying, all right, I'm going to bed, because in actual history, that is probably what happened. You know, not everything is so dramatic. And when you think about how undramatic it is, it reminds you that all these people were living just a normal day of their lives. And suddenly tragedy strikes. And that's what makes tragedy so much more tragic. All right, here we are in apparently Thomas Andrews' stateroom. Now, the room itself, I will give an 8 out of 10. It looks really nice. It looks 7 out of 10 maybe. Looks like there could be a little bit more detail to it. But it gets like a 0 out of 10 in terms of what cabin he should be in, because we actually know what cabin he was in, and it did not look like this. Down in the boiler room once again. The boiler rooms, we can only give it like a 6 out of 10, but it's really hard. I don't blame them. It's really hard to recreate anything that resembles Titanic's boiler rooms, just with how little they're documented and how much detail you'd have to add to a set, or you'd have to find a ship with a boiler room, and similar with the engines. It's hard. It's hard to do those spaces. Now we are meeting a new character, a baker that you may recognize from many Titanic stories that we've told. Chief Baker Charles Joggin. Somebody tell me how to say his last name. Speaking of last names, Lightoller in his cabin, pretty good looking cabin. I don't know the officers' cabins too well to know if that's super accurate. But look at all this. I mean, that looks really good, and this boat deck looks great. I'm just so impressed by everything. I think it's wonderful. Just goes to show the historical accuracy of this. But things are really starting to get tense here as we jump from this part of the ship to that part of the ship to this part of the ship. We're seeing all these people, and that's how the book feels. When you read the book, you're just jumping from person to person, and you're wondering, when is it going to happen? And now we're back on the Californian. The Californian is going to see Titanic off in the distance. There she is. And now this officer, Groves, I believe, he's heading back down to talk to the captain. This is going to happen throughout this movie. The officers will go down and wake up Captain Lord and give him updates on what they're seeing. And Lord kind of does the same thing each time. Now, the real Captain Lord was very upset by this film because in this scene and in these scenes, he's, wearing sort of a casual sleeping outfit. He's not in his uniform. And Captain Lord was very specific about the fact that he never took his uniform off. He was just resting. He wasn't going to sleep. He was just resting. And here's the chairman, resting in his room. Now, here's this very strange scene. I think this might be the same guy who was up on the boat deck a bit ago. We'll have to go back and look. I don't know what this accomplishes because I scoured the movie. I don't think I've seen this guy in many other scenes, but I don't know. I guess they're just showing that there's plenty of life on board Titanic, which I appreciate. And now we get to meet some very important people. Let's totally ignore that doll that this kid has in his bed. You're going to see it again later. We'll just pretend that's not there. But this is another first-class family that we haven't met until this point. A nice young husband and wife and their two beautiful children. I love this family. They are probably my favorite storyline in the film, as short as it is. And now, here we go. The big moment. Iceberg dead ahead. Now that interaction, not exactly how it went, but that's okay. Overall, this is a very faithful recreation, I'd like to think. We close the watertight doors. There's a little electric display, which Titanic did not have. There's one of the many models of this movie. The models change depending on the scene, which I think is funny. I think the drama is pretty spectacular here as we get closer to that iceberg. It's the 50s. It's not going to be too realistic, but I think for the time, I think it's really great. That little slow zoom into the lookouts was great. And she hits. And we get ice on the well deck, as survivors told us. We get water in the boiler room, as Frederick Barrett told us. Now we'll see stokers running through the watertight doors, just like in 1997. But here's a nice touch. This trimmer falling through a coal bunker like that. That comes straight from George Cavell, a survivor, a trimmer who the rattle of the ship actually made him fall through a coal bunker. So that's a nice touch. Now this conversation between Murdoch and Smith, straight from the testimony. We're back in the smoking room, and we get one of the classic moments in a Titanic film, a passenger with ice, keeping it for a souvenir or wanting it for their drink. We've heard it so many times from various survivors on this podcast. And now, as Barrett told us, the men have to draw the fires. And this is a cool moment. This steward's saying that we'll be going back to Belfast. You'll see. The opening chapter of A Night to Remember is called Another Belfast Trip. And that's kind of how the book opens, with the steward saying, oh, we're going back to Belfast. I wonder if that would have been a good thing or a bad thing to them. Probably annoying. You're probably not making any money for that trip back to Belfast, so this probably would have been a bit of a bummer for them. Of course, it would only get worse from here. Now we get, some of these scenes feel straight into 1997. Passengers talking in the hallway and a person of authority walking by with a very stern look on their face. Just very effective. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but it just seems like a lot of these scenes get a little bit of a shout out in 1997. Andrews was taking a little cat nap while he worked, heading up to the bridge. And we've got Chippy here giving an update, as he did. And now Ismay is on the bridge. Now, he was already on the bridge earlier in the movie, but in real life, apparently, this was the first time he was on the bridge. And now Andrews is here. I love this Andrews. I think he does a fantastic job. And now the third class got to play a little kickball, little football with the ice. It's funny because a lot of this stuff you would say like, oh, well, this is also in the film. Well, it's also in history. Like a lot of this stuff is in both movies because it happened, and so many survivors told us it happened. So it's a great opportunity for it to be in both movies. That's why there's so many similarities, because it's all comes from the same source material. We're back in the boiler rooms. The steam is going up, so they gotta get to work, get these fires out with nowhere for the steam to go. There's only one place it can go, and that's out the tops of the funnels, which I believe they're about to experience. There you go. Right on cue. Love the acting from that group. As a former actor myself, I enjoy seeing people with very small parts with no lines and just seeing how genuine their performances are. And then this shot, man, fantastic. Andrew's just full well knowing that the ship is going down. He's seen all he needs to see. And now our obligatory scene where a steward tells a passenger that everything's okay. Bride waking up just as he told us, asking what's happened. A bit of a difference there that he's offering since he's awake. It's not exactly what happened, but, hey. I love this John Phillips as well. I think he's a fantastic actor. Great performances all around. Now, this is the obligatory Andrews explaining to the captain, a.k.a. explaining to the audience how this is about to go down. And this is, almost line for line appears in the 1997 film. She's going to sink, Captain. Now, it's been said that Andrews said in this moment that it's a mathematical certainty. And it appears in the 97 film, and it will appear here. Andrews is much calmer in this scene, in this adaptation, than he is than Victor Garber is in 97, which I find interesting. It's almost like he's accepted it. There it is. It's a mathematical certainty. And I love that this scene is just between these two men, as it would have been in history. In 97, they added a bunch of people to the room, like Ismay. An hour and a half. 2 at most. And just like in 97, 2,200 or more, we have to end this scene by reminding the audience how many people are on board. And in this movie, they even remind you how many spots are in the lifeboats. And that line was essentially the, "I believe you will get your headlines, Mr. Ismay" line. Please insert VHS 2 at this moment. It's kind of funny. This is the halfway point of the 1997 film, but it's only 40 minutes in. We've got an hour and 20 minutes to go. So while this movie skips to Sunday very quickly, this movie also gives us much more of the sinking, which is great. And now Smith tells his men, including Ismay, what's going on, which is much more in line with what we believe happened. What a shock that would be to hear. And even though all the officers are here, Officer Lightoller will sort of be our officer for the rest of the evening. Murdoch will get a couple things to do, but You'll even see gunshots will go off, and of course Lightollers the one shooting them, and someone will yell at Ismay, but instead of Lowe, it'll be Lightoller, of course. So Kenneth More just gets to do more stuff. And I love this here. Ismay, or the chairman, as he's named in this movie, he isn't quite the villain that I think he is in other adaptations, which I appreciate. He's having a very genuine reaction. He's just so surprised, but he's not angry. He hasn't told Captain Smith to do anything. He's been nothing but confident, maybe a little annoying, a little mousy, as Ismay might have been, but it's very authentic, and I think we like that. I like that they're cold and they're rubbing their hands. Just a little reminder that it's freezing outside. I don't think that's something we get in '97 very much. And so here we are in a bit of Bride's testimony, hearing Captain Smith give the order to send out a call for help. And they get right to work. And we hop over to the Californian, whose wireless operator, of course, went to sleep already. And now these officers, these officers begin this long process of staring at this ship on the horizon, seeing some peculiar things, and doing very little about it. Now here is this officer who's, again, very interested in technology. I believe earlier in the movie he said, "I may stop in and listen if you don't mind." And so here he is taking a listen, turning on the wireless so he can hear the buzzes. And unfortunately, Groves does not understand what these buzzes mean. And the drama here, of course, is that this officer was literally hearing Titanic call for help but couldn't do anything about it because he didn't essentially speak the language. I think the reality of this situation is that the wireless wouldn't have been wound up at all, and he wouldn't have heard anything. So it's quite dramatic that, we're here to say, no, wake him up, that's the dramatic side of things. So maybe we'll add that to the list of over dramatizations. We've only got a couple. We had the christening didn't happen. We have the wireless message getting lost. There was one other I forget, and then that one. Now we're hearing some of these ships that we heard about from Bride, the Frankfurt, being mentioned. And there you go. Send SOS. It may be the only chance you have. Very nice adaptation of that moment. It was a joke, but no one laughed. It was just a joke is even a strong word for what that is. And here's our obligatory steward coming to get the passengers in their life jackets in a very calm way. And in the 1997 film, of course, we cut to third class to see them being thrown at passengers, basically. And here we are, third class, with the stewards just yelling at everybody to get up. So again, these moments appear in both films. It's kind of fun. Water coming up the crewman's spiral stairs there. Back on the boat deck, getting the lifeboats ready. This empty, freezing boat deck. You can see the breath. It must have actually been pretty cold for that to, I know in the 1997 film they actually added, in post, they added the breath. But here it must actually be pretty cold. Now, just like our witness, Daniel Buckley from season 1, these third-class passengers are waking up to water trickling on the floor. I love this room, this cabin. It looks like they're at like the bow or perhaps the stern because the bulkhead on the left there is slanted. Very cool. Love that. And then we get a rare shot of a crew quarters. We don't get this at all in 97. So this is nice. And the crew's yelling at this guy. I love it. The stewards slamming the door. It's great. And then this is wonderful. This appears in the 97 film, as you'll recall. Andrew's telling this steward, let the passengers see you wearing it, be a good example. And the reason it's in both movies is because Annie Robinson, the stewardess, said this actually happened. We get some passengers talking about how this ship can't sink. That's a nice model. Sometimes the models look good, sometimes they don't. Now we're in the what looks to be, I suppose this is the general room again, but there were stairs there, so now it's kind of the open space. It's confusing. It's sort of like these passengers, a bit of like an amalgamation of, I don't know if I'm using that word right, of things just kind of crammed together so they don't have to build multiple sets and they can kind of use the same spot for two things. Oh boy, better go up. Back to the wireless room. Hard at work. Love that shot. Now we join the Carpathia for the first time. A nice model of the Carpathia. Some officers having, I guess, what would you call this? Locker room talk? Kind of a weird thing to do for this movie, but hey. So that was Harold Cottam, Sparks, as he just called him. So he's the wireless operator. And this is a nice touch here. He's about to go to bed. And as he's getting ready, and this is what actually happened, as he's getting ready for bed, he thinks, I'm just going to put the headset on real quick, just take a listen one last time, make sure I'm not missing anything while I, take my boots off. And this was when he heard Titanic's calls for help. I believe Captain Rostron explains that Harold Cottam was literally taking his boots off at the time. Now, in terms of acting, this is the one performance I'm not quite on board with. My apologies to this actor who I'm sure isn't alive anymore, but he goes a little over the top here with this message. So far, it's okay. Like, he's doing his job. He's got to get to the captain. But he's like almost emotional talking about it. Like, I don't know. There would have to be just a little bit of apprehension because, like, it would sound so crazy. Titanic sinking. It makes no sense. It's amazing that Harold Cottam took it so seriously in real life. I think the acting here is perfect. Put that actor and a picture of Captain Rostron next to each other. They found the perfect guy for this. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that this was like Captain Rostron's son. Though I don't know if the timing works out. I actually might. Great acting, great casting. Love it. This movie came out at a great time because the 50s, in terms of movie performances, acting was getting pretty grounded. Yeah, look at that. This guy's getting the hero's edit. Rip off that shirt. Acting was getting really grounded in reality prior to the 50s, 40s. When the further back you go, the more over the top, and everybody sounds like they're from the mid-Atlantic accent. They're not British, they're not American, they're somewhere in between. We're getting away from that, and so this movie gets to be much more grounded, and we're so grateful. Otherwise, this movie would be unwatchable. And there's the 4 hours comment that we, of course, know from 97 as well. Now, this movie does a much better job of involving the Californian in the story. And we already talked about that because we get to see them, of course, but we also get to experience Titanic's crew seeing the Californian. Like this moment. They go to it so much. They talk about the Californian so much, which the Californian, does it ever get mentioned in 97? Maybe in passing once that a ship is on the horizon. I don't even know if that's true. But this movie makes a big point to mention that they're out there. Partly because this movie is really going hard after the Californian. And we, of course, appreciate that this captain is getting a much more realistic portrayal. He's not some comatose zombie. He's doing his best. And rockets in the sky. Ismay helping get the boats ready, as he did in real life. Looks like a rocket, sir. Yeah, of course it does. And this is a spectacular part of the movie to include that these officers are watching it happen. That must have been so frustrating for people to watch this movie and be like, come on, how did you not do anything? And the orchestra is at it. And yeah, there's a clarinetist in there. I believe some of the string players could play multiple instruments, and maybe one of them could play a clarinet at times. But just generally, there was not a clarinet in that orchestra, to my knowledge. We've begun loading lifeboats. Women won't go. They won't separate from their husbands. Classic Titanic storytelling. People getting out of the boats. Frustrating to us today, but would make total sense at the time. Why would you get in this little boat and catch my death of cold? Remember this, folks? You won't be able to get on back on board tomorrow without a pass. That is straight from one of our witnesses on Witness Titanic. Ella White told us about that. And we're back with our men playing cards. This gentleman who's talking right here, he is, I believe, credited as Mr. Hoyle. I think he's just a fictional character who's meant to represent multiple first-class men all at once. But he'll be in the rest of the movie. So remember that face. We get the men trying to get the pump set up, which I really like to see. Martin. Who's Martin? Looks like an officer. Martin. Somebody in the comments. Who's Martin supposed to be? All right. Here is the father of that first-class family. And I love this scene. He is explaining that he has children on board. Apparently 3. I forgot he had a third. And he's not the panicking type. And this is fantastic because it's Andrews doing what we know he did. That for some people, he would lie and say, be calm, get in a lifeboat, whatever. But for other people, he would tell them flat out what's going on because he knew one person could handle it, one person couldn't. And he knew this gentleman when he said, I'm not the panicking sort. So he says, get your family in. And so this next few moments with this family is just wonderful. Him coming back and telling his wife, we've got to get into the boats, but he can't tell her what's actually going on because she'll never leave the ship without him, knowing that the ship's going down. So he's got to play it off like it's nothing. And this is the type of heroism I love. And this is based on an actual account, and I'm blanking on the name at the moment. Someone saying, as a matter of form, I believe is what he said. As a matter of form, the women are being loaded in the boats. And she believes Robert Lucas. These are the Lucases, I believe is their fictional last name. And this actor is doing such a great job. This guy, he's going to get his family ready to put them in a lifeboat, and he knows his chances at survival are next to nothing, but he's got to remain calm. It is just fantastic. Oh yeah, he does have 2 daughters. Okay, he's got 2 little girls, and then the little boy. That little boy is so funny. All right, now the stokers are getting out as the bulkhead goes. Very, Frederick Barrett inspired, clearly. It's going in a much more dramatic way, I guess, but they have no idea what the how that actually went. But I think that has to be inspired by Barrett's testimony. These two having champagne like it's nothing. Love this shot of a little kid, a little girl seeing the rocket and smiling. Very 97. I think James Cameron took that. Oh, here's a nice moment inspired by Vera Dick, a survivor who said that someone nearby told her and told others that it's, try it on, sister, it's the latest fashion. I believe that's what she said in her testimony, the latest fashion. So you can see, I mean, if you haven't noticed, I mean, every scene is inspired by somebody's testimony. The purser being overrun by people trying to get their possessions back. This reportedly happened. And now we're back in third class in that general room, open space area, and here we go, folks. The gates. The gates are back. This is another one of those big historical inaccuracies. Now, in their defense, it's based off of certain third-class passengers mentioning gates. They don't mean the floor-to-ceiling Bostwick gates like that, but, you know, it's part of making a Titanic movie. You got to show the third class trapped like rats. Now we get to see the engineers, which is nice. And this is a nice moment because we get to see the engineers being the heroes that they're often painted as being, which they were. Again, I never want to say that they weren't. They all went down with the ship. It's a terrible tragedy, but this is a much more realistic interpretation of that they're, you know, in this moment, they're going to stick to it. You know, they're a little scared, but they got to stick to their duty. And that's realistic heroism. And then they'll have a little bit of tea in the meantime. Here's that model of Carpathia flying by. Now we've got Captain Rostron giving out orders, and this comes straight from his testimony, all these little commands that he's giving everybody. In his testimony, he has a piece of paper with him in the inquiry where he reads off each thing that he told people to do. He must have written it down and just wanted to recall it. So he explained every little tiny precaution and thing they set up. You know, send the doctors to this place. This room is going to be a makeshift hospital. Let's have translators ready to go. You know, he was very thorough, and they're of course giving them that hero's edit. I love that shot. Engineer realizing, eesh, that's not good. Back onto the boat deck. Things getting a little more chaotic, but still organized. And now we get to see Charles Yoggin right there, the chief baker, who we're going to see throughout the movie. He's helping load boats, which he did do. He was assigned to, I believe, lifeboat 10. And here he is giving up his seat for a woman. That's, from my understanding, that's not in his testimony. But this is, again, he's just supposed to represent any crew member who did this, which many of them did. You know, I'll let a passenger take my spot because I don't think anything's wrong. And then he's just going to walk away. And now this moment, I mentioned this earlier, that Ismay and Lightoller are going to get at it with each other here. In real life, it was Officer Lowe, and Lowe apparently had no idea that he was yelling at Bruce Ismay, his boss, essentially. And that's why these two have this moment of, there'll be trouble about that when we get to New York. And that's apparently what the crew around them thought. Like, ooh, someone just yelled at Ismay. He's going to get in trouble. But, of course, that is the least of anyone's worries. Great shot of a boat being lowered down a very Titanic-like side of a ship. Very well done. You can see the ship is tilted slightly. Just great Hollywood magic happening. More rockets. And let's check in with the Californian, still off in the distance. So frustrating. You can see Quartermaster Rowe in the background sending off rockets. So here's a perfect example of what went wrong with this in real life. The officers, they're seeing some peculiar things, so they call down to the captain to let him know, and they're kind of waiting for him to give them an order to do something serious, and he's kind of waiting for them to tell him that it looks serious, and they're both just kind of waiting for the other person to do something. They think it looks a bit queer, and so they're just going to keep signaling using the Morse lamp. And that's what they did. They apparently tried to use this little lamp to do a little Morse code kind of thing with Titanic. And Titanic tried to do it back, but they weren't seeing each other's Morse lamps, I guess. Here we are with the Chief Baker once more, back in his cabin. And he's about to do what he will become famous for. Have a little drink. If you know the story of the Chief Baker, we'll eventually have him as a witness on our podcast, no doubt. But if you know the story, he drank so much throughout the evening. The story goes that he drank so much his blood couldn't freeze, and that's why he survived. But that's of course not how hypothermia works. Back on the boat deck, first-class passengers being unaware of the gravity of the situation, talking about being seated with certain people. And here we are with the Lucases, my favorite family, and our least favorite doll. Just forget about it. It's a period piece. First-class passengers being upset. Now, Lightoller is looking down at the water coming up the stairs. He keeps coming back to this part of the ship. He did that in real life. I don't think he used the shit like that deep, and I'm pretty sure he used the stairs just off the bridge. But regardless, it is from his testimony that he was using a stairway of some sort to measure the progress of the water. Quartermaster Rowe sending off more rockets. Still looking off at the Californian. Water's up to E deck forward. That sounds about right for the time of the sinking. We are back on the boat deck, and this woman is terrified to get in the boat for good reason. She says she's not been in an open boat in her life, which comes from many survivors. But looking over that edge, you understand why she wouldn't want to get in. Third-class passengers trying to find their way through using second class as a bit of a shortcut, just like in real life. This steward, I love that he kind of looks like one of the stewards in 97, that's White Star Line property. That guy. It's kind of funny. Just goes to show how good the costumes are. And here's our Chief Baker, a few drinks in. Nice to have a little comedic relief. Ship is going pretty good now. As we rejoin the Lucases on the boat deck, watching men and women get torn apart. We get my favorite scene in the film. The father still trying to downplay the situation. I never expected to ask you to obey me. And these are straight from survivors' mouths, like straight from what survivors said. So good. This is the kind of drama I want to see in my Titanic films. Calm drama. Saying goodbye to his children. Well done. Husbands wave goodbye to their families, some of them unaware, but he's aware. He knows this might be the last time, likely the last time he sees them. It's the last time they'll see him. This is the Titanic to me. Incredible. And folks, we are going to pause there for the time being and continue our deep look into A Night to Remember next time on Witness Titanic. If you don't want to wait, Part 2 is already available for patrons with early access over on Patreon. And speaking of, with only one episode left this season, the patrons and I decided to read through the book, A Night to Remember, during the off-season and discuss it each week in little mini episodes, sort of like a one chapter at a time thing. So it is still a fun time to consider joining, even though season 2 is about to end. Next episode is our last episode for season 2. How crazy. Until then, be kind to each other, Titanic community. I'm your chairman, James Penca. I will see you next time.